So this is my kitchen table. We're going to be giving this a makeover. I'm going to paint the base and the chairs white and sand down the tabletop. As you can see, it's pretty ruined. That's from fingernail polish remover and kids and life. I'm going to reupholster the chairs. Our cat has put all kinds of scratches in these, so I'm going to reupholster it with this kind of, I don't want to call it burlap, but it's like a really thick gray material. It's kind of like the cotton drapes that, I can't think of the name, that people are hanging in their living rooms and over windows. But depending on what's underneath the cushion, I'm either going to leave it the plain board and just stain it, or I'm going to reupholster it with this fabric. But the first thing I'm going to do is wipe this down with soap and water, get it really clean. I'm going to sand the top down to the bare wood and restain that. So I started sanding this inside, but I decided to take it apart and bring it outside now that it's warmed up a little bit. And it was just creating too much dust in the house, and I'm a little OCD and kind of thought it was a bad idea to begin with, especially with brand new couches. I just got them yesterday. So I took it apart. I'm going to sand it all down and the legs, and I'll show you what it looks like when we're done. So now that I have my tabletop all the way sanded down to the bare wood, I'm going to use Rust-Oleum stain in the shade Kona. And I'm going to be using a staining sponge. I got the stain from Walmart and the staining sponges from Lowe's. And these are just some rags that I have. Once I get a layer of stain on, I'm going to come back and wipe it up with the cloths. Now that I have the whole tabletop stained with the Kona, I'm going to come back and give it a gray wash with the Minwax Wood Finish stain in Classic Gray. I got this from Lowe's as well. And same technique, I'm just going to go right over the top, brush it in. I'm going to let this sit just a little bit longer before I come back and wipe it up. So now that I've stained my entire tabletop, what I'm going to do is use this Waverly Chalk paint in the shade Silver Lining, and I want to give this a barnwood type finish. So what I'm going to do is take the tiniest amount of this chalk paint, but very, very little. And I'm going to dip my brush into it. I went very, very little. I mean, that's even a lot. And with a flicking motion, I'm just going to go back and forth. And I have a really damp rag, I mean like very damp, and I'm just going to spread it in. Anywhere it gets too heavy, you can just take this damp rag and spread it out. So I'm going to continue this method all over the entire tabletop, and I'll come back when I'm done. So I sanded the table legs down to the bare wood, and now I'm giving them their first coat of chalk paint. I'm using the same paint I used on the chairs, the DIY chalk paint in vintage linen. So now I have my table assembled and back in my kitchen. I haven't had a chance to finish my chairs because it's been too cold and wet and just raining, and I need to spray them outside, and I can't do it in my shop, unfortunately. So now what we have to do is seal the table, and I'm going to be using this polyacrylic. I purchased this at Walmart, and it is just a water-based sealer, and I'm using clear satin. I purchased these at Walmart as well. This was in a 4-pack. This is just a 3-inch foam brush. This is just a little tray, and I have a hand sander with 220 grit sandpaper. In between coats, I'm going to lightly sand it down just to remove any brush strokes and make sure I have a clear surface. So I'm going to apply one coat, wait 2 hours for it to dry, lightly sand it, do a second coat, lightly sand it, and then finish with a 3rd coat. So instead of shaking this up really good, I don't want to create more air bubbles, which will create bubbles on the table. And I want a smooth surface, so I'm just going to lightly stir it. And pour some in my tray. I'm going to set this to the side. So I'm going to take just a little bit, I'm going to wet my brush with it. And I'm going to try and make long, even passes and minimize the strokes instead of a bunch of short little strokes. And you want to go very, very thin on this. This is a little chunk. I'm just going to pick that up. So I'm going to do the exact same thing for the table base all the way around. So I have my first coat of sealer on and I've let it dry for 2 hours, and now I'm going to lightly sand it. I have 220 grit sandpaper, and when I say lightly, it's just very ever so softly. You're really not putting any pressure, but any raised brush strokes or brush marks, that's what you're trying to sand out. And just that little bit has already created a smooth surface. So then once you do that on the entire table, just in the spots that are needed, you can come back on and put a second coat. After 3 coats of sealer, my table is now complete. As far as the chairs, that's a whole nother story, a whole nother nightmare, which is going to lead to part 2 of this video. This chair all the way to the left has 5 to 6 coats of paint on it, and you can still see the brown showing through towards the bottom. The chair all the way to the right has 3 coats, and as you can see, it's nowhere near ready. I mentioned earlier in the video that the chalk paint was a no prep, no sanding, no priming, etc., but it's definitely not. That's definitely a gimmick. Don't make the mistake I did. I'm totally going to have to redo all 4 of those chairs. I'm going to have to take them outside and sand them down completely to the bare wood, prime them, and repaint them. I'm going to give them 3 coats of paint and seal them with 3 coats of the sealer. So that's definitely going to take some time, and it's definitely going to be a part 2 of the video. So as far as the table, I hope you enjoyed it, and I really love how the barnwood finish came out on the top. So if you did like this video and found it helpful, please give this video a thumbs up and be sure to subscribe to my channel for more DIY videos.